bad.
¿Cómo estás, amigos? I'm your friend, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have a guest that you might not know, but you definitely, probably know his work. Samuel Rivera. He is from Samuel Rivera Films, the production that is responsible for the viral Joe Rogan video called Freedom. I'll put links to that video in the show description. It's a great video, and Joe Rogan himself discussed it on the show, posted it on his Instagram, and I believe some other social media platforms. But awesome video that highlights some of Joe Rogan's concerns, some of Samuel's concerns, and also some of the concerns we've been discussing on the show. And we talk about all that and more. He goes into how he got into filmmaking, what inspired him to pursue this passion, and it really is a inspirational story. So hold on and get to know Samuel Rivera on this podcast. With that said, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this episode or any of my episodes, consider giving some value back, and that doesn't mean financially. I like to stress that and highlight that because I know a lot of people are in shitty situations because of the vaccine mandates. I know a lot of people are in shitty situations because they're in a job that doesn't pay well, that they don't enjoy. So don't worry if that's the case. Share the show, review the show, tell your friends about an episode you really like or an episode that you really connected with, and that all is value enough. And if you are in a good financial place and you can't support the show financially, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. I have a Patreon page, and once a month I do a Patreon podcast with my Patreon supporters. So if you want to join us on the next one, please support me on Patreon. I have a Rockfin channel, which is like a YouTube alternative, uncensored, and you can find all my videos there. And you can also tip any episode you like. So that's another great way of supporting the show. I have a PayPal account if you want to tip the show. I have a crypto wallet if you want to send some crypto, which nobody has yet, but if you want to, you can find that all on my website, rickyvrands.com or the rippleeffectpodcast.com. I also have a merch store and some new designs coming shortly, so keep a lookout for that. But you can go check out the Hulk Smash design and some of the original Ripple Effect Podcast logos on there. We have hoodies, tank tops, long sleeve shirts, kids stuff, mugs. And I know in many places in the world it's getting colder, so definitely prepare yourself with some hoodies and mugs. And last but not least, check out the other show I host with my brothers from different mothers, Midnight Mike from the OBDM show, Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions, and host of Tinfoil Hat and many other shows, Sam Tripoli. Subscribe to the You've Done Wanted. It's a giant conference call of thinkers and alternative media content creators and researchers. And we have had an amazing list of guests on that show. Dr. Judy Mikovich has been on there. Roger Stone has been on there. Scott Horton, Ben Swan, Jim Florentine, James Corbett, G. Edward Griffin. The list goes on and on and on. And you can find links to the You've Done Wanted and all my shows, all my episodes uncensored on my website. So please check out the rippleeffectpodcast.com or rickyvrands.com. You can also find links to all my social media accounts. So if you want to contact me, including the new Telegram chat, if you want to connect with myself or other listeners of the Ripple Effect Podcast, please check out the Telegram chat link on my website. Just go to contact and you'll find the Telegram chat and much more. So that's it, guys. Sorry about the long intro, but a lot of stuff to get to. Many great episodes already booked for this month and early next month. So I'm really excited about recording and sharing those conversations with you. And hopefully everybody's doing well in these crazy times, doing as well as you can be. And don't forget to live, laugh, and love. Life's too short not to. And I'll see all you guys on the next one. Peace.
I believe What's up, man?
What's up? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good.
I like your setup. Very nice.
Thank you, thank you. I think we have very similar we have very similar stories, which what caught my attention was well, it was funny because before Rogan shared your video, I don't know who shared it that got my attention. I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. And then I looked into your work and I saw some old video of you kind of telling your story about how you basically just picked up a camera and just did it, and you just wanted to do something. And that's so similar to my story, which I'm sure listeners are sick of me sharing, but just how I just felt just like I needed to do something. I needed purpose. I needed, just I felt unfulfilled. And so many interesting people like yourself and others that just pursue it. It's like you never know where it's going to take you, and so many people are procrastinating their life away, just like maybe I'll do it. Oh, I want to start a podcast, or I want to start filming, or I want to start this project or that project. They never get around to it. And worst case scenario, even if you try it and it doesn't get to where maybe your goals are, you're going to be much more satisfied looking back at your life knowing you attempted it. But before I rant away in this intro, for people listening who might not be familiar with your background, your story, let's get into a little bit of that, a little bit of your origin story. How did you get into filmmaking? And then also some of your personal perspectives and opinions that kind of come out in your films and your personal philosophies.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where to even start, but that's an awesome intro. I basically started filmmaking out of out of a hobby, or it started as a hobby. I would just make like little videos with of my family, like my daughter running around, and just like I just always had fun with the camera, right? But that eventually merged into hey, you know what? I was training at a jiu-jitsu school, and they were going to be doing like a belt promotion, and I thought it would be a lot of fun to interview my coach and sort of document the belt promotion. And within our the jiu-jitsu world is everybody sort of knows each other. And when I created that video, it kind of went viral in our local community, and I said, oh shit, like cool, I didn't think that somebody would dig this kind of video. And I had never done it before. In fact, like I edited it on like Windows Movie Maker on this like piece of junk laptop. It took forever to edit, but I had a great time doing it. Right, I stayed up late, and in fact, like my wife like woke up in the middle of the night. She's like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just editing this video, whatever." And so anyway, I released it, and it kind of went, viral, like in our small community. And when I say viral, I was used to like maybe 15 people seeing a video of mine, because it was just like family videos, to like 1,500 people seeing it. I'm like, oh wow, like that's a pretty big jump. And so I interviewed like another coach that I had known from another jiu-jitsu school, and then that video did really well. And then I interviewed this other coach. His name is Brian McLaughlin. He used to be he actually was in like the Ultimate Fighter years ago. And that video ended up doing really well. And afterwards I asked him, like, hey man, like, is there anybody else that you would want me to interview? Because I just really love telling these stories. And he said, yeah. He goes, but I would really love for you to tell the stories of the coaches that work for me. And I kind of looked at him like, and I said, like, you want to pay me to do this? Like, he goes, yeah, I'll pay you to create these videos for my business. And I said, holy shit. Like, and at that point I said, okay, like it had never dawned on me to turn this into some sort of business, or even think that this could even be a business. Again, I was just doing it as a hobby. And that's kind of how it all started. This one guy gave me an opportunity, and I said, oh shit, maybe there's something to this. And the rest is history, I guess.
Was there any filmmakers or anybody that you looked up to that you got like, because you know how when you get into art, you always kind of start observing artists that you like, and you're like, okay, what do they do that attracts me? Is there anybody that was a huge influence at first?
Yeah, a big influence for me was a vlogger. His name was Casey Neistat, and he used to put out these like daily video vlogs on on YouTube, and I just loved his style. And he was sort of an inspiration for me to like sort of copycat what he was doing and make my my versions of that with like storytelling. And if you look at some of his fast cuts, like if anybody's listening to this that's seen his videos on YouTube, you'll see the similarities, right? Like he's very fast-paced cuts. He cuts to the beat, and my videos are very much like that. So I took his style and I kind of made it my own. So yeah, he was probably one of the biggest influences. No big directors or anything like that. I wouldn't say like a James Cameron was a guy that I, aspired to be like. And still to this day, I really have no aspirations to like create like a movie. I'm really enjoying doing the types of videos that I'm doing now.
So once the lockdown happened and all this stuff happened, were you kind of motivated to kind of get your thoughts out there and kind of, I mean, well, before we get into that, because I think like, so your personal philosophies and your artistic ability kind of meshed into these videos. And is there origin story to some of your personal philosophies? Like what was there certain books, documentaries, people in the alternative media world that you were a fan of that kind of helped mold, your worldview a little bit?
I mean, I guess the biggest influence, I mean, there's a lot of influences that I've had. I can't just say just one person. Like there's a lot of lessons that I've taken from interviews that I've done for the videos that I've created. But then, obviously there's guys like Joe Rogan. He was a huge mentor for me from afar, really at a time in my life when I really needed it. I grew up with a dad, but he really wasn't like somebody that offered a lot of life advice. And at the time, this goes back about 10 years ago, I was going through a divorce. I had to move back in with my parents, and I was I had thousands of dollars in debt, and I really had no direction in life. And around this time is when Rogan released his he started creating podcast episodes. And the advice that he gave on that show was really like a blueprint for me to like how to live my life. And from that point on, I sort of became obsessed with improving my life, like self-improvement. I started reading books, people like Tony Robbins. I started doing jujitsu. I started working out. At the time I was like 280 pounds, and I dropped down to, I walk around now at 170. So yeah, it wasn't just any one person. It was really a lot of influences. Rogan was a big one, but there was a bunch of other people that I, looked to as mentors through books or through videos, and it really shaped the person who I've become, who I am today.
It's funny because Rogan influenced so many people. I was the same way. I started in 2013 podcasting, and I was kind of similar story. I was doing a lot of commuting for work. We have like a little family-owned construction company, and sometimes we would drive wherever the work is, and that means sometimes 2 hours away, and it'd be these long, crappy days of like spending 4 hours on the road, 8 hours doing labor-intensive work, getting home too tired to actually find some energy to enjoy life a little bit. And if it wasn't for podcasting on that drive, I mean, it literally changed my life in regards to not just information I was consuming, but it gave me something to look forward to. Like at the end of the day, to hop in my truck and know that like, okay, there's that podcast I can't wait to get through on the way home. And I remember being, at one point being like, driving sucks. I hate all this freaking driving I'm doing. There's nothing thought provoking to listen to. And how many songs can you listen to before you get sick of it? And then next thing you know, I found podcasts, and it's like, oh my God, like I get to my destination, I don't even want to get out of my car because I'm so engaged in this conversation that I'm like, I kind of want, and I know it's like on demand, I can pause it, but it was like, I'd be so engaged in the conversation, and conversation's such a journey where it's like, oh, now this journey's kind of taking a left turn, and I want to see where this conversation's going. And I'm in my car, and I'm like, I should get out and just listen to this after. But yeah, I got so into it. And the thing about Rogan was he's probably very similar to yourself or me. It sounds like it, where he's a very curious person, and he's into so many different things, like like yourself, filmmaking, jujitsu, working out. I'm the same way. I've always been into work. I've been a gym rat my whole life. A lot of it was just to kind of build my self-confidence, and then I learned a lot about nutrition and health. And I'm into that. I'm into, artistic things like music and comedy and film and just a little bit of everything. But then I've always had this kind of conspiratorial side of me where I like going down these interesting rabbit holes of people who are completely turning what I thought I knew upside down. And when I remember the first time he had Graham Hancock on, I'm like, this is so fascinating. Or the first time I had Dennis McKenna, or he had Dennis McKenna on, or the first time, all these really interesting people. And I'm just like, wow, man, I don't even know who these people are. This is so wild. And he would have he exposed me to so many people that eventually ended up being on my show because he was such an influence. I had Dennis McKenna on, I've had Eddie Bravo on, I've had
Wow.
Douglas Ruskoff, which I'm a big fan of, and he was on Rogan's show back in the day. I mean, so CJ Werleman, I mean, so many Daniele Bignelli, Dan Carlin, Lee Camp. I mean, a lot of these people, maybe not all of them, but most of them, I was exposed to them through his show, and I'm like, these people are so fascinating. And so to eventually have him on my show, it was awesome. But he really did and I think that's why people trust and appreciate him, because he doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't plant his flag anywhere. He doesn't have a team that he defends. He'll have a libertarian on, and like a Dave Smith or whoever, and then he'll have somebody who's on the left, like a Abby Martin or Lee Camp. And I love that about him because I'm the same way. Like, I'm a curious person who enjoys exploring ideas, but I don't plant my flag anywhere. And because I feel like it stunts your growth, and then you end up spending more time defending your ideologies instead of exploring ideologies, because like I've decided to pick one. So is that some of the stuff you enjoyed about this show, just being exposed to so many different people and stuff?
Yeah, 100%. It was that. Then, just for me, I just had such a thirst for like, how can I become a better person? So, but yeah, like, so whenever he had those kind of guests, or he would kind of give you like, I would say back in like 2011, 2012, he was giving like a ton of like, life advice. And for me, I had such a thirst for it. But yeah, I also enjoyed like listening to, to authors come onto the show and different people that I would just never have heard a 3-hour conversation. And I was listening to him back at the time when he wasn't even posting a show every day. It was like every other day. And that podcast episode was max 2 hours. So I was like, shit, what am I going to listen to, tomorrow and the day after? It's like, there was just no shows. You actually had to, I remember I used to like, I think it was joerogan.net, where you had to go and you would download the show onto your computer, and you had to transfer onto like a little MP3 player. And I would listen to them, to these episodes, like at my, my 9 to 5. I was working 9 to 5 at the time, and it would help me get through my day. Like, so to you, like, similar, right? You would drive to work, you listen to these 2 hour episodes, and it would get you through the day. Same thing for me. It would get me through the day of working this 9 to 5 that I freaking absolutely hated.
Yeah, I remember how excited I would be on the way home when he would go live, when he was still doing live shows, and I'd have like a crappy day at work, and then I hop in the truck and I'm like, oh shit, Joe Rogan's live. I can put it live on the way home,
Yeah.
and I would be so excited to see like, oh, who's he having on now? I mean, like even Mark Sisson. I'm such a fan of Mark Sisson. Chris Kresher, Dr. Chris Kresher. I mean, so many amazing people that maybe I knew their names, but I wasn't really familiar with their work. And just to hear a 3-hour conversation, that's the same thing. And it's funny because I was such a fan, I attempted to kind of do a very similar show where like my show is very casual. Like, I don't have questions in advance. I don't, I don't try to, I remember a quick story about Jesse Ventura. When I had him on, I remember, I forget who it was that helped me book him as manager, agent, public. I don't know who it was, but they end up sending me like this list of questions to ask Jesse, like the night before the show, and they're like, okay, so this is what Jesse wants to talk about. Here's some questions to ask him. And I remember like stressing about it all day the next day at work. I'm like, what if I don't ask these questions? I'm like, is he gonna get pissed? And I just kept like going back and forth. I'm like, then don't they listen to the show? Like I don't ask questions like this. I'm like, casual. It's a JRE style type of conversation, and that's what people enjoy. And at the last second, I'm like, you know what? Fuck these questions. I'm going to just do what I always do, because I'm like, even if I do these questions, I might make him happy, but I'm gonna suck because that's not the way I have a conversation. So I'm probably gonna struggle or get nervous because I'm uncomfortable, and so I just I winged it, and he ended up staying longer than he was supposed to. Really enjoyed himself, and then said he was he was willing to come back on, and he had fun. And I think that's what people like about JRE, is that you're probably tired of being asked the same questions over and over again. You're tired of this, because typically, like, especially if somebody's doing like a book tour or they're promoting something, they get asked the same questions. You
Yeah.
basically get like a similar answer. So the thing about having a 2 or 3 hour show is like, okay, you probably get some of that stuff out of the way at some point, but there's a lot of other conversations you end up having that gives you an insight into the guests and who they are and other aspects of their lives that you might not even know about. And when I have musicians on, I'm a big Fear Factory fan, and it was a huge deal when I was really happy when I had Burton C. Bell on, the singer of Fear Factory, a metal band that I grew up listening to. And we didn't talk about music at all, basically. We did, like, I don't know what it was, like an hour and a half or whatever, and we talked about philosophy and his influence of Man versus Machine and a lot of his artwork and stuff like that, and just so many interesting things. And I had so many people were like, oh my god, I've never heard him talk about this, or I've never heard him talk about that. And I'm like, this is the appeal of JRE.
Yeah. Yeah.
People were talking about shit on that show that I knew no other show they would discuss. And I mean, was that something that was super fascinating for you?
You mean like in terms of like the guest that, yeah, no, absolutely. It was just like a one-on-one conversation. And going back to your situation with Jesse, like I think that's great that you said, fuck it, I'm not going to ask those questions, because it would just be against like the whole reason you even started this podcast, right? It's like, I think it's important that you always stay true to your roots and why you even started this show. And but you're right, like there's authors that I remember, like Matthew McConaughey, when he was going on his book tour, and he was on like every single podcast. I listened to maybe about like 5 of them. Like, and to your point, I'm like, they're asking him the same questions. He's just repeating the same thing. And I was actually in the process of reading his book. I really enjoyed it. If anybody out there listening that hasn't read that, I would highly recommend it. It's a great book. But yeah, he ended up just giving the same answers over and over again. I'm like, okay, this is kind of boring. And I, like you, I sort of put myself in his shoes. I'm like, Christ, like how boring must that be to like just repeat yourself over and over and over again? I mean, I get it's a necessary evil because you're trying to promote the book, but Christ, how many times can you answer the same question?
Yeah, but you know what? In a way, you indirectly promote the book by having a really fascinating conversation.
Exactly.
Because it's like,
absolutely.
he just had Jewel on, and now she's like, I'm like, how did I never know she was so fascinating? The way she looked at her life, the way she analyzed and self-reflect, it was a perfect type of guest for Rogan, because that's the type of stuff that he's great at, is the self-reflecting and self-analyzing and talking about that. I mean, back in the day, he was well known for his DMT conversations and psychedelics and all this stuff, and using those type of things as a tool to try to dissect who you are and what you want in life and all these bigger questions. And it was super fascinating. So if Jewel wrote a book, even if she went on and didn't talk about it at all, I'd be more intrigued with that book, just because I'm like, okay, this is she's super fascinating, so I'm intrigued with her book. So it's yeah. And but your filmmaking is very similar. I like, you can take you realize when you do films and you're interviewing people, or you're interviewing people for a podcast, that everybody has an interesting story and people have things to say. And even somebody that looks like, okay, they're just an average person, like, you start dissecting or getting into their life, and or even into their brain, you end up finding like, oh my god, there's layers to this person. Do you find that?
Yeah, in fact, there was a video I'd done. It hasn't really gotten that many views, but it was a friend of mine that I met him at my jujitsu school. He was at the time he was still a brown belt, maybe he was a black belt, I don't remember. But in any case, we always have these like crazy battles on the mats. But that's as much as I knew about him. Just like kind of small talk after class or in between matches, or in between roles, I should say. And I followed him on Instagram, and then one day he made a post that was like, it was really insightful. I'm like, man, like I'm like, this guy, I love his his way of looking at life and how motivating it was. And I went down like a rabbit hole with like reading his posts. So I hit him up. I'm like, hey dude, like I'd love to like chat with you and see, and at the time I was doing videos just that were based on like motivation. And so him and I met up at a Starbucks, and I said, like, what's your deal? Like, how'd you, have you always been into writing, et cetera, et cetera? And he went down this like crazy story of how like he was once, he used to sell drugs, he got locked up, and like how he completely changed his life, because he hit complete rock bottom. Like his mom didn't want anything to do with him anymore, and that was really the catalyst for him to change his life. And it's amazing now, because now he's gone on to, like, he works for like Tony Robbins, and he's this motivational speaker. I still, him and I talk, on almost like on a weekly basis. He's a good friend of mine. And yeah, it was, I forget your question, or I forget where I'm going with this, but the point here is that, like, yeah, I've always just been sort of intrigued with like fascinating stories, people that have something to say. And yeah, I guess everybody does have, a story to tell. I mean, it's sort of my tagline for my business that, everyone has a story. And I truly believe that. Sometimes they're not interesting stories, but I think that, we all have a story to tell. I have interviewed some people that, they did have stories, but they weren't all that interesting. So
That's so, I say it all the time. I love people. And when I say that, I'm so intrigued with other people's perspectives on the world and different issues. And like when I get together with my friends, like we'll talk about something. And a lot of times I'm just kind of bringing it up because I'm like, okay, this is kind of my stance on something, but based on their upbringing, influences by, from books that they read or people that they grew up with or whatever, like what's their, opinion on this. And I love just like bringing in different people's opinions and perspectives, and just trying to get as many different shades on a issue or topic as possible. But one thing I find is, you get one-on-one conversations with people. There's so many people have dealt with some type of trauma or self-esteem issue or weight issue or pill issue or alcohol issue or something. And it's like, it's so easy to assume that, like, oh, this person had an easy life, or that person's had. It's like everybody's dealing with something, and
yeah.
everybody had, like you said, everybody has a story, and everybody has, and like you said, some people, they're not the most interesting of people, but other people are just gems, and you would never guess it. I mean, some of my most interesting past guests have been people who I just didn't think I was going to have that deep of a conversation with. And next thing you know, I'm just like, holy shit, this person is so interesting. Like, I just want to pick at their brain for hours and just kind of figure out who they are and why they think this certain way and all this stuff. In regards to, so I'm sure people listening will eventually want to hear about what inspired you to do the Freedom video, the Joe Rogan Freedom video that went viral that he ended up reposting. What did inspire you to do that? And did you have any idea that you're going to have Joe Rogan himself actually share it?
Well, Rogan's, a lot of people don't know this, because they just recently started following me after that Freedom piece. But Rogan's actually been really good with like sharing my content in the past. He's, I've done about 7 different Rogan pieces, and then I've also done stuff that I've taken from like Rogan's podcast, and he's been super generous with like getting my content out there. So I, one of these days I've got to shake the guy's hand and say thank you. But what inspired me to create that Freedom video is because, I don't live far from New York City, right? And what's always on the news in the morning here is what's going on in New York City. I'm literally like 20 minutes outside of the city. And just seeing like all these, at the time, all these lockdowns that were, not lockdowns, but these vaccine passes that they were talking about. I'm like, I immediately thought about them as being like super dangerous. I'm like, fuck, like, I can't believe they're actually going down this avenue. And then I think a day later, or maybe a couple of days later, ironically, I was listening to a Rogan podcast episode, and Rogan went on this rant, and I said, wow, holy shit. Like, I've got to turn this into something. So again, I had experience with creating videos on Rogan. And so when I got home, I immediately, screenshotted the video. I I started working on it, and as I was editing it, I said, it was the first time I ever created a video, and I said to myself, this actually might go viral. And I spent like 2 days like nonstop, waking up at like 6 a.m. in the morning, and working on it until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for 2 days. And and I released it out into the world, and it did really well on my own. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but I actually released it at the end of August 2021, and Rogan didn't actually share it until like 3 weeks later, and then that's when it went like, really viral. So it went from like, on my own, I got about 1.1 million views, and then when Rogan shared it, it ended up getting around 5 million views on his page. I don't know where it's at now at this point, but it's in that 5 to 6 million. So no, I didn't really expect him to share it. I really create these videos and I put them out there to, into the world, and I don't expect anybody to do anything. Like, if Rogan wants to share it, great, awesome. I really appreciate it. It helps me. But no, I, I didn't really expect him to do it. And if he doesn't, then that's great. That's just kind of the cherry on top of the icing. But yeah.
Well, I think it highlights a real concern that he has, you have, and many of us have. And I think when you I mean, that's the power of art and film, is that if we discuss it without the music and the imagery, it it can be impactful. But once you start adding that stuff, it hits a nerve, and you realize how serious it really can be, because what he's talking about is what you're seeing. And when you're seeing it and he's talking about it at the same time, you're like, that wasn't that long ago. And we're taking baby steps in the wrong direction. And because they're baby steps, you don't realize which direction you're actually going into. And
Right.
it's a matter of time before we're there. And we're like, oh shit, how do we get here? Well, we got here because every little baby step that we kept saying, this isn't a big deal, or this isn't a big deal, or that's not a big deal. Now it is a big deal, because now we've gone too far and we can't go back.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when Rogan specifically shared it, there was a lot of hate that it got, because you're like, oh, how can you say what's going on today is exactly the same of, with the Holocaust? And it's like, no, we're not. They're not lining people up and putting them up, throwing them in trains and putting them in some sort of concentration camp. But that also didn't happen overnight. The freedoms were taking away, like you said, within baby steps. And for me, man, like, I'm very careful with what imagery I tie to my videos, because I want to make sure that the message that I'm getting out there is the right one. And so before I even released that video, there was a lot of pre-production stuff that I did, right? Like, I watched a lot of documentaries. I want to make sure that what I am tying to this video is accurate, and at least I can show some sort of parallels. And like you said, yeah, like, what's going on today, no, nobody's out there, throwing people in, well, maybe in Australia they are, right? They are throwing people in camps, and you see what's going on over there, and it's like, shit, like, they're not that much different than us. And if we're not careful, we allow the government to continuously take our freedoms little by little. It's extremely dangerous. So I, like Rogan and like many other people that have seen that video, I feel like, the writing's on the wall, right? If we don't stand up for it now, and we continue to let the government take away our freedoms bit by bit, we could put ourselves in a hole that we might not be able to ever climb out of.
I tell people all the time, the government doesn't give you freedoms. They're there to protect your freedoms, and they're not. What they're doing is, and I think it was Hotep Jesus when he was on my show, and I keep repeating this because it's so true. He kept saying, he's like, if I give you 10 feet of chain, are you free? And then what if I give you 100 feet of chain? Are you free? If I give you 1,000 feet of chain, are you free? And it's the idea that, like, yeah, they're giving you a little bit of freedom, but they still got you tied down, and they still don't let you live your life completely. And you said, so you live, where do you live currently?
I live in a small town called Nutley, which is northeast New Jersey.
New Jersey?
And yeah, so it's, like I said, it's right outside. I go right down the street and I can see, New York City skyline. So for me, it hit home because, it's not that far, right? My wife and I, my family would like to go into the city, go see Broadway shows, go have dinner. We enjoy the city. And now, now we can't, right? Because we've got to, have this, this passport that's mandatory. And I didn't agree with that. I'm like, I think that's completely ridiculous, especially when you're looking at, look, I'm no scientist, I'm no doctor or whatever, but you look at some of the facts that are out there, and they're pointing to like, okay, the masks don't necessarily work, or there's a lot of side effects to the vaccine, and there's you got to get one booster shot and another booster shot, and you can still get it and give it. And it's like, okay, why I'm not at a listen. I don't believe look. I'm not against anybody getting it, right? Do what you think is right with you, for yourself and your family and so forth. But I don't believe that I should have to go get it when I don't trust what the government's telling us that it's safe, and that that it's whatever. And I just think it's ridiculous that I need to get this in order to go have dinner with my family or go into to the gym. It's crazy. Luckily for at least for right now where I live, like the restrictions are pretty loose, right? Like you can go into most businesses without a mask. You don't need a vaccine passport, but that's subject to change at any point.
Well, I'm also not a scientist or doctor, and Rogan's not either. But look what happens when you get CNN's doctor on the show and he gets demolished. It's funny that people are like, well, Rogan's not a doctor. Well, you had a doctor, the guy who is the person you trust to give you the statistics and a professional expert opinion on CNN. He's basically the face of that, of that channel in regards to doctors. And he gets stumped over and over and over again by Rogan. And one of the most interesting parts of that interview, what I think was kind of overlooked, it was when Rogan goes, "What are you, a vaccine salesman?" Because it was because he finally said what we all know he went on that show to do, and that's to sell the vaccine. And it's like, he's not here to meet you in the middle. He's not. He's like, he has a opinion on this issue, and he's gonna try to convince you to kind of go a little closer to his opinion, and hopefully they can use a clip or something to promote after that Rogan said he'll get the vaccine, or Rogan, and it wasn't working. He kept saying, well, will you get the vaccine? It's like, wait. He just gave you all these reasons to why it's ridiculous for somebody healthy like him who has already gotten the virus to get the vaccine, and you're still pushing like, why don't you get the vaccine? Why don't you? It's like, it didn't matter which points were made. He was just there for one purpose. And I give Rogan a lot of credit for being very nice to Dr. Sanjay Gupta afterwards and saying that, and I know that they've hung out and talked and they text message, but it seemed pretty obvious that he wasn't going on there for the purpose of trying to meet in the middle somewhere, and when Rogan, kept asking, was like, why should kids get vaccinated? Why should, all these, he just didn't really have an answer. And it blew my mind. And then the whole like, that's the longest conversation I've ever had. It's like, well, maybe that's why you're kind of, wearing blinders, because maybe you should sit down and have longer conversations with people. I think you live in this news world where you're asked to fill in a 1-minute segment, and then you goes to typically a big pharma commercial anyways, who's paying all your salaries, and then it goes, and then you're back and you just give a couple, you give your points, and then you move on. So you don't really have a long form conversation where you can actually take the time to really dissect these issues and give them the time that's necessary to really share our ideas, perspectives, where our ideas and perspectives came from, the information that we've read and learned. And so it just, to me, I give him a lot of credit, because throughout this whole lockdown, I was initially a little disappointed in the fact that he, at first, he was kind of, I mean, he was pretty down the middle, but I'm like, come on, Rogan. I'm like, it's so obvious, like, what's going on here. Like, just give me a sign that you see it, And then once he finally, like, had Brett Weinstein on, I've also had Dr. Robert Malone on too. And Dr. Robert Malone, he's not a politician. He's been in science. He's been like a bookworm his whole life, and he's been in science and books and research his whole life. And all of a sudden he's being called a right winger because he's on right wing shows, only because those are the only shows that will talk to him. He's like, it's not my fault that, CNN won't have me on, or MSNBC won't have me on. He's like, so people call me right wing because I'm on these shows, but nobody else will talk to me. So and then Rogan finally got a taste of how strong the propaganda is, because if he said anything like that was even mildly, against the vaccine, like, oh, what was it, like the Dave Smith interview where he's like, I don't think young kids should get the vaccine. All of a sudden, like headlines, headlines, headlines everywhere. And that's the thing. Like, I'm with you. People should have every right to decide what they want. You want to vaccinate your kids, vaccinate. If you don't want to vaccinate them, that's okay. If you want to put masks on them, if you don't, whatever, that's all like up to the individual. My problem is we can only make knowledgeable decisions on our stances on these issues if we have the information. And then if you dissect all the information, you come to the same conclusion. That's great. My biggest problem is that one side of the argument is being completely suppressed, where you can't hear Dr. Robert Malone. You can't hear, my YouTube channel a couple weeks ago gets complete. I've been on YouTube since 2013, or no, before that, because I was posting music and stuff, and completely deleted. I've never monetized ever, and completely deleted for medical misinformation. And the shows that were being flagged were shows with medical doctors. It was the Dr. Peter McCullough. It was the Dr. Carrie Madej. It was, I'm like, these people actually have written prescriptions. These people have actually studied medicine. They have PhDs. You might disagree with them, but at the end of the day, like, the person who's flagging my show or reviewing my show for medical misinformation, I can guarantee they don't have a PhD. Like, they're not an expert in this field. So how are you going to tell these people? And prior to 2020, it was completely okay for doctors not to agree with themselves. I mean, agree with one another. They would analyze information, be like, you know what? I'm coming to a different conclusion. Completely acceptable. Only now we have Fauci's the only voice that matters, even though he got a tough interview with Eugenio, the Latin Mexican celebrity. You ever see that interview?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was a great interview. He's like a Mexican celebrity, and he's kind of like a famous Mexican Latin American celebrity. Eugenio, I forget what his last name is. You can't find the video anymore. This guy is
Really?
a celebrity. What Dr. Fauci didn't know, that he's very skeptical about the vaccine. So we actually started giving him like tough questions and it was the only tough interview he's done. And you start seeing Dr. Fauci getting pissed. Like, in his head, he's like, who the fuck booked me on this show? He's like, nobody did, because I'm like, I'm not supposed to get tough.
They set me up.
They did. Yeah. You could tell he had that look like I've been set up, because when something didn't make sense, he would follow up with it and be like, well, that doesn't make sense because of this, or that doesn't make sense. He's like, he started off by saying like, oh, you're saying that these vaccines are approved, but they're not approved per se. They're not FDA approved. And there's things that are FDA approved that are still dangerous. Like the idea that just because like that FDA approved is the gold standard. Has anybody ever been up late watching TV when a commercial comes on and says, have you had a loved one that died from this drug? Well, guess what? That drug was FDA approved. So
right,
if something's FDA approved doesn't mean that it's safe and effective. Like this idea that like, that's the gold standard all of a sudden. And that's the other thing. Like, when did Big Pharma become the good guys? Like, I just don't get it. I mean, Big Pharma, if you're talking about anything else, chemical companies, these big corporations, if you're talking about DuPont, if you're talking about Monsanto, if you're talking about Pfizer, whoever, who J&J, putting asbestos in their baby powder, like Pfizer with like some of the biggest fines and lawsuits in the history of pharmaceuticals for lying and deceiving about their drugs. Like, all of a sudden we trust these guys. Like, all of a sudden, like they have a moral department that is assigned just to vaccines. We're like, hey, all you guys that only care about profits, you go work on our other projects. But all you moral people, like, do our vaccines, because we don't care about money here. And it boggles my mind, and in the East Coast, you and I, like, we're dealing with a lot of brainwashed people who really think like this is all about safety and health.
No, you're right. And then, back to some of the other points that you touched upon is that, like, listen, we know for a fact that the government has lied to us in the past. So to believe the fact that they're telling the truth today is like, and you shouldn't question anything that they're telling you. I mean, I remember back when the Twin Towers went down, I was like, like many people, we were, watching the news like 24/7. And I remember them saying like, no, the air quality is safe and, you're fine. And now here we are 20 years later. And how many of the people that were first responders are no longer here? It's like, listen, man. And like you said, like the FDA, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they approve, right? Like food coloring for a fact, for example, it's like, that shit's not safe for you, right? Like there's long-term effects for, again, it's like, it's not going to kill you right away. But the point here that, like you're saying, that because the FDA gives it approval, that's some sort of like gold standard, like, yeah, it's fine. Like we don't have any long-term studies to tell us that these vaccines are going to be completely safe. And I know, one of the funnier comments that I would get during the on my freedom videos, like, well, George Washington also made all his soldiers get the smallpox vaccines. Like, okay, yeah, that's true, but when was the last time that you got the smallpox vaccine and you gave it to somebody and you still had it? Right? It's like, when was the last time, now kids get the the chicken pox vaccines? Like, they don't get it anymore. It's like, you can get the the COVID vaccine and you could still get it, and you could still give it to somebody. So is it really a vaccine? What am I exactly injecting into my body here? So naturally I'm skeptical of that. And that's the reason I personally choosing not to get it. And the fact that I'm being sort of punished, right, for not getting it, like I can't go into a restaurant if I want to go into the city, is completely ridiculous. And what's funny is that a couple of weeks ago I was out in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and a friend of mine and I, we went to go see this MMA show, and it was outdoors, so we were able to get in. And then afterwards, I was like, "Hey, dude, let's go hit up let's go to the diner afterwards." And it didn't even occur to me until we walked into the diner. The guy's like, "Oh, how many?" And we're like, "Oh, just us two." And he's like, "Can I see your vaccine passport?" And we both looked at each other. We're like, "Oh, fuck!" Like, and we went, and the guy's like, "You guys got vaccinated, right?" And he was just like, he was like nodding his head, and we were like, "Yeah, we got back." He's like, "Come have a seat." So, these businesses don't want to get hurt either, right? It's like, they don't give a shit, right? It's like, or some of them don't, I should say.
Because it's not their job to enforce that nonsense. It's already hard
Yeah.
enough to survive 2020 and still be in business. And now you're making them turn down people who are, who are customers who want to spend money and enjoy their services because they didn't get vaccinated, even though the vaccine doesn't stop them from going to that business and spreading it. And it doesn't stop them from getting it in that business either. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. The antibodies thing, like, why aren't we doing antibody tests? So there's just a study about J&J in 6 months being 3% effective. So somebody who got a J&J vaccine 6 months ago can go anywhere, and somebody who just got COVID, who has antibodies and never been vaccinated, can't. Like, it doesn't make any sense. None of it, because, and that's the thing. Like, one thing that was frustrating with some of these bigger podcasts that would kind of tiptoe on this this topic, they would, and Rogan too, to be like, why? I don't get, why aren't they doing this, or why aren't they doing that? Like, why this, why that? And I kept saying, like, the why is easy. It's money and power. Like, we keep saying, like, okay, why are they doing, like, there's so many examples of, from suppression. I've had Mickey Willis on, who from the pandemic documentary, who, one of the most viral documentaries ever. The extent that they went to make sure people didn't watch that, they were removing the video from people's personal cloud accounts. Okay, it was scary, like how they were going to people's personal account. They changed and locked his Wikipedia. They they called him an anti-vax. I mean, this guy's been in film his whole life. I mean, nobody ever cared about his personal views until he came out with a documentary that, like, made a little bit more sense than what the TV was telling them. It's like, oh wait, like, the TV's telling me all this stuff, but I don't get it. Like, I'm looking around, I don't know anybody who is reporting back that the hospitals are filled. Nobody's reporting back that all their loved ones are dying. And yet, like, this guy puts out this film, and they're saying, like, okay, what's really going on is this, and you're like, oh, this makes way more sense than what the TV's telling me, because the TV's telling me the world is burning, and they're showing me videos of Chinese people in the street, and all that. Like nobody ever explained that. Like where do those videos come from? Because
Yeah.
we have a bad flu. Most the rest of the world got a basically the coronavirus was the bad flu that we all assumed it was. And yet you were showing these videos that were provoking fear and scaring people, and really what made people okay with doing what they did, the lockdowns and staying at home and all that stuff. That's the thing. I keep telling people, like, you got to remember what we were sold on. We were sold on, if like we were so afraid of getting this thing that people didn't spend Christmas and Thanksgiving together because they're afraid they're gonna protect. They're afraid of getting it or giving it, and they want to protect their loved ones. And all of a sudden now it's like, if I find out a friend of mine has cancer, I'm gonna call him and be like, "Hey, dude, are you okay?" Like, or text message him or something. If I hear a friend has COVID, I'm not. I don't. I'm not gonna even bring it up because it's not even a concern. It's like it's not even something like that's how mild of a concern this thing is. That like nobody is like, oh my god, did you hear that Fred has COVID? Like, oh, let's go bring him food. Let's go check him. Let's go see how he's doing. It's like you might text message him and he'd be like, dude, I don't even have any symptoms. It's like it's
Yeah.
crazy. So it's
Yeah.
so what we were sold and then what we got were two complete things. And yet, like, they're still pushing all these regulations and ridiculous just government overreach, and we keep doing it. And it's just like, and it's almost like when gas prices go really high and all of a sudden they come down a little bit and then you're satisfied because it's like, well, at least it's not what it was. That's kind of what they've done with the lockdowns. It's like they completely shut everything down, gave you zero freedoms, then they give you a little bit back, and you're like, well, at least we can go out, right? It's like, no, man, like we deserve more, and we were lied to. I mean, Dr. Fauci should be in prison. I mean, if anybody's ever not watched the Dallas Buyers Club, I highly recommend people going back and or maybe rewatching it, because it's based on a true story, and it's very similar. There's a lot of parallels with what's going on now. With just like the power of big pharma. I mean, big pharma, we used to be concerned about the military industrial complex. Big pharma is now way more dangerous than military industrial complex. I mean, if the military industrial complex can use their influence and money to sell us into wars that we know are going to lead to the casualties, and a ridiculous amount of taxpayers' money spent on these wars, why wouldn't big pharma, who has now more money and influence, not be able to do a similar thing? Like it's to me, it just makes logical sense. When every other commercial on whatever news station you're watching is a big pharma commercial, I mean, that's why I'm actually stunned that Tucker's kind of gotten away with the stuff that he's talked about. I'm like, they're letting you talk about this on Fox News? Because I'm like, I just saw a pharmaceutical commercial and now you have Dr. Robert Malone on, or you're talking about possible adverse reactions with the vaccine. Like, I'm kind of stunned that they let him kind of get away with what he's getting away with. But sorry about the long rant.
No, it's good. I mean, they're probably raking in so much dough that it doesn't matter what he says, that they're still making so much cash. Like if he was a direct reason for them, like being in the having an effect on their bottom line, for sure they would probably cancel his show immediately, right? They would probably have that power to do that. But I mean, shit, when they're on every single, did you see that video that sort of went viral? I know Rogan posted it. Somebody edited a video that said, it was Good Morning America, sponsored by Pfizer, and then it just showed news, every news intro, and then they said sponsored by Pfizer, and it was incredible how many shows were sponsored by Pfizer. So yeah, to think that they're not like they have an influence on what the media does and says. It's crazy. Again, like I was saying before, it's like, these news outlets and government have lied to us in the past. I mean, shit, did you see recently, like with the Southwest Airlines, I, I mean, you saw it, right? I'm sure you see where I'm going with this, right? Like, a lot of the employees went on strike. And then I remember the next morning, I was watching the news, and like every one of them were just, talking about how these flights were canceled because of the weather. And it's like, okay, like I'm done watching you guys. Like I can't believe anything you're telling me anymore. It's like, we know for a fact that the reasons that these flights were canceled were not because of weather. It was because they were standing up. And yet you're reporting that it was because of weather. It's like, it's crazy. It's like, what's the reason for this agenda? And again, like people have said in the past, if you follow the money, right, it'll usually lead you to the answer, to the truth. Um, at the end of the day, I believe these pharmaceutical companies have, they don't have our best interest in mind. It's about their bottom line. It's about making bigger numbers than they did the years prior. And if it means us getting sick, then they've got so much money that they can pay for whatever lawsuits come their way afterwards. But it's up to us, man, to stand up and fight for what we believe in. And I truly believe that, like, if we're not careful, and if we don't stand up now, that we'll look back at this and say, shit, like we should have stood up when we had a chance.
Without a doubt. That's why I'm such a fan of people like Ian Smith from the gym. His gym is in New York, or right? Yeah, I believe it's in New York. The guy, the gym owner who refused to lock down, refused to put masks on. We need people like that. We need more people who are willing, because they, a lot of people don't realize, like, they're way overreaching, because when a school committee can decide to mask kids, it's like, well, what authority do you have on this? Like, we're not in a state of emergency anymore. Like, and if you believe we are, look around. Like, turn off your TV. I keep telling people, like, turn off your TV, turn off your radio, just look around. If you just woke up from a coma and I said, hey, we're in a pandemic, they'll be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I see the grocery store, I see people getting together, I see, like, the only reason you would believe we're in a pandemic is the illusion that you're seeing on TV. I mean,
right.
It's that movie Network, like, remember Network from the 70s?
No, I never saw it.
Oh, it's a great classic where it has a famous line where the news anchor guy kind of loses his mind and he's like, turn off your TV. He's like, I'm mad as hell. And he's like, the TV tells you how to dress, what to eat. No. He's like, just turn off your TV right now, and it's like, he just loses it on air. And it was, it was way ahead of its time, because it was even then, TV was influential, but not compared to now. And then when you look at, like, how everybody's colluding together, when Trump, Alex Jones, whoever it may be, gets banned off everything, regardless if you agree with these people or not, like, that's dangerous. That's dangerous, because right now, and Rogan has said it, and it's true, like, right now it's somebody you don't like, but eventually it might be somebody you do like. And once you give up power, they never give it back.
No,
they never, so when you did that Freedom video, were you concerned about the backlash, because you were kind of dipping your toes in kind of a controversial topic?
Yeah, I did get worried. I'm like, and a couple people are like, oh, you're gonna get banned. And I'm like, oh shit, like, because at the end of the day, like, I don't make these videos and make any money off of them, right? I just do them because I enjoy doing them. I think there's a message that needs to get out there. But at the end of the day, I've got a business, right? This is what I do full time. And a lot of my business does come from from some of these social media outlets. And I did have a large concern. So before I hit the upload button, I'm like, shit, should I really get this out there? And I said, fuck it, I got to do it, right? And I just dropped it, and I said, let the chips fall where they may. And it ended up working out for me. Obviously, I'm here on your show, and the video's still live, and it's been shared thousands of times, and it's done really well. So but what's funny is that because of that video, I met so many incredible people, as a result of it, Mickey being one of them, right? Like, him and I are talking about potentially doing some work in the future. And but there's also another guy that I met, his name is Ari. He's got a nonprofit called Project Stand Together. You might have seen his video where he printed out a bunch of signs. He lives in New York. He printed out a bunch of signs at Staples that said that we will not discriminate whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And he went to a bunch of local businesses and asked them if it was all right to put up this sign in their front window. And the video went viral for him. And I remember seeing that, and I'm like, shit, man, that's pretty awesome. And a few weeks after I released that freedom video, him and I kind of connected. I helped him create some videos, and now um, he's gone on to like, be on some huge podcast shows. He's printing out signs, sending them all over the country, and he's really like, trying to spread this movement. And it's incredible because you see all these businesses that don't agree with these mandates. They're more than willing to put up these signs and say, yeah, come on in. We don't care whether or not you're vaccinated or not. Like, we want you to come into our establishment. But anyway, yeah, I'm glad that I didn't, stop myself from releasing that video out of fear of, oh, I might get banned, or my business might get shut down as a result of it. I said, what again, I needed the message. I felt like the message needed to get out there. And I think that was critical. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about music and filmmakers now, that people are using their artistic ability to kind of get these messages out there and get people's attention. It seems like this issue's becoming less political. I've been saying this a lot lately, where people's opinions on the vaccine mandates and all this stuff, when it was close to election time, everybody just kind of they were just blinded by whatever political party they thought you were in. So it's like, oh, if you're anti the vaccine, it's because you're a MAGA hat wearing crazy person, or if you're for the vaccine, it was your way of showing your support for Biden or the left. And now you're starting to see people kind of detach the vaccine and the mandates and all this ridiculousness with the politicians. And you're seeing like unions stand up, which is awesome because they're traditionally very left. And now that they're turning on these mandates, you see, black athletes that were pro Black Lives Matter and more left leaning. Now they're standing up and saying, no, this isn't right. And people are finally realizing, like, okay, this isn't they divided us and they got us fighting among ourselves, but this is dangerous for all of us. This hurts everybody and doesn't benefit anybody except the elite and pharma, who's going to benefit from the money. I mean, you look at Bill Gates. I mean, people talked about Rogan and how Rogan isn't a doctor, and I'm like, what? Bill Gates is being interviewed everywhere, and nobody cares that he has no PhD. He looks like a slob. I mean, he doesn't look like he's ever worked out in his life. I'm like, I wouldn't get advice from him on nutrition or diet or health. I'm like, before 2020, I'm like, Rogan's done plenty of shows on diet and nutrition and exercise. So I'm like, he kind of knows a little bit about keeping your immune system strong, keeping your body strong. He's not a complete white belt on this topic. He might not be a PhD or scientist, but a lot of people in the health world, they kind of understand that, like, okay, the best way to go about it is diet, exercise, watch what you eat, all these type of things. And then maybe as a last resort, look for pharmaceutical drugs. But why haven't we had two years of talking about diet, health, and especially when we know, like, obesity is a huge a huge issue in regards to COVID deaths. Like, the majority of people are overweight. So it's like, why aren't we harping over and over again? Oh, people need to start eating cleaner, less processed foods. Also, instead, you close down gyms. You tell people to stay at home and watch Netflix and snack all day. Don't go outside. All these things that lead to probably more COVID deaths. And then you see things that are completely obvious that are political, like when Cuomo banned doctors from writing prescriptions for hydroxychloroquine because Trump mentioned it. I'm like, why is he getting involved in a relationship between a doctor and a patient? Like, you keep banning actual doctors from being outspoken, and then Cuomo can do things like that, or Bill Gates can go around and give medical advice all day. It's like, how do people not see this? At one point it would get so frustrating, because it's like, how do you not see what's going on here?
Not only that, but then, like, why not question, why would he not want somebody to, a doctor to prescribe that, right? It's like, what interest do you have in that? It's like, again, if you follow the money, is it possible that, I'm not saying that he was getting something underneath the table, but what's his incentive for, you know what I mean? Like, what's his incentive for asking a doctor or preventing doctors from prescribing a specific medications. Like, I don't know. I don't think he's in a position, or any politicians in a position, to tell us what we, should or shouldn't be able to take.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when you look at Bill Gates, when he was openly saying that they wouldn't share the patents, or they shouldn't share the patents of these drugs, because uh obviously he's a big fan of patents, because he's big, which, if anybody knows the history of Bill Gates, he's a huge fan of patents and not a huge fan of open source anything. But uh, he wouldn't share the patents to when initially the vaccines were being rolled out. They were talking about just increasing the supply by letting other labs create these vaccines, and they wouldn't let them. They wanted to make sure that the pharmaceutical companies got their profit and maximum profit, and we threw so much money at them for development. I mean, these things should be super cheap, and they're not. And it just to me, it is so obvious. And when people don't see it, it's like, how many dots do you need before you start connecting them? Like, I think there's enough dots where it's like, we're not Alex Jones like losing her mind, but sometimes I feel like Alex Jones screaming and yelling, because I'm like, okay, this is why he gets worked up, because because it's so obvious. Sometimes it's like, how do you not see this? Like, wake up, people. It's
Yeah.
scary. So are you optimistic? Do you feel like, because I feel like there are a lot more people speaking out than the news lets us know. There's more people who think like us. Like, I think many people think they're on an island where it's like, I'm surrounded by crazy people who aren't seeing this. But the truth is, there's a lot of people out there that are seeing this and are speaking up or protesting. People just aren't reporting on it. So do you feel like we're going in the right direction in regards to like a serious resistance happening, or what do you think?
That's a good question. I'm naturally, I'm like an optimistic person. I try to remain hopeful throughout many situations. But with this one in particular, I don't know. I don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, if I'm being completely honest. With, with the things that should be broadcasted, not, like you said, where the unions are protesting, and there's a lot of people standing up, and instead things are getting censored, and the truth is not being told for the way it should be reported. I don't know, man. I just see it keep on continuing to get darker and darker and darker. I hate to say that, but I don't know, unless there's some sort of like, I do see a lot of people standing up. Yes, 100%. And I think there's a lot of like-minded people out there. But at the end of the day, man, I don't, until these mainstream establishments lose complete control, um, I don't think anything's going to change. I think it's just going to continue to stay status quo. I feel like something big has to happen in order for that to happen.
Well, I think one of the big things that could be a big thing is Joe Rogan being outspoken. I mean, he literally hosts the biggest show in the world, and
Yeah.
it reaches a lot of people. And I think the Dr. Sanjay Gupta thing was ginormous, because to have somebody on there and have a 3-hour discussion where they can dissect these issues, and there's no BSing like, oh, well, I didn't have time to talk about this, or we didn't really get into that. It's like they got into everything. Nothing made logical sense on what Dr. Sanjay Gupta was saying. And to me, it's like, it's nice to know that people listen to him and people trust him, because if people have been listening to him as long as like you and I have, we know that he's not trying to sell anybody anything. He's a genuine curious person, and he's just asking questions, and he's in asking those questions have led to him to this conclusion. And I think that's what people enjoy about him and respect his opinion.
No, I agree with you, and I agree also that I think it was huge, right? And he's got the biggest podcast out there right now. But I guess my question for you is like, how many of the people that that listen to the mainstream as the truth actually listen to that podcast, and were, I don't want to use the word converted, but how many of them were actually like the people that are typically mainstream, news listeners listen to that and say, oh, okay, I never really looked at it that way. I don't know. I mean, how do you put a number on that? I think a lot of that is just, as Joe would often say, right? Confirmation bias. It's like, it's the same listeners listen to the same, to the same argument, right? And it's like, it's just a confirmation bias. I, I don't know, man. I still run into a lot of people where they still, are on the other side, where they believe that the the government's telling the truth. They believe the vaccine is 100% safe. The FDA is the gold standard. I think there's still a lot of people out there that believe that. And that's my concern, is that a lot of times these guys have the larger voice, right? The majority of us are skeptical, or a lot of big percentage are skeptical, but how much, again, when you have these mainstream news outlets, feeding the general public this certain level of truth, um, I just don't know if it's enough. I think something bigger needs to, and I don't know what it is. I just feel like something bigger needs to happen in order for real change to happen.
Well, yeah, maybe it's not the big event, the big thing, but I think things are building a little bit in our direction, where people are, like I said, the unions, the athletes, a lot of people who weren't on this side of the debate are now finding themselves on this side of the debate, and starting to see things from, the perspective of, like, maybe this went too far. And I'm hoping it's now baby steps in the right direction, where it's just like, okay, now the unions
Maybe.
are pushing back. Big shows like Rogan are asking questions, and really just exposing how BS the news really is. I mean, the fact that, they were calling it horse dewormers, what he was taking, and ivermectin, and openly talking about that, knowing that they're deceiving the public, that, they're not talking about how it cured river blindness, how it's won awards, because it's a generic cheap drug, just like hydroxychloroquine was. I had this guy Joel Hirschhorn on, who wrote the book Plandemic Blunder. I believe he's like 80, and he's worked at universities. He's been in the medical world forever, and he put all these doctors together in this book that were having success with different types of treatment, and all these treatments were suppressed. And it's like, how many people have died because you go to the hospital and they tell you, we don't have anything for you? Oh, by the way, like, we are hearing some conversations about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and zinc and all these other things, but because it's not protocol, we're told, we don't have anything for you. Let's put you on a ventilator. And then that leads to the overuse of ventilators, which led to a lot of deaths. And it's like, it just, to me, it's, I hope that that we're both wrong, that maybe, these aren't the big events that are going to lead to people waking up. But I do believe in the spirit of America. I've talked about this on the show, how I was born in Portugal. I came when I was young, and when I first got politically just aware of what was going on in the world, I was very motivated by like 9/11 and going into Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm like, what the hell did these countries have to do with 9/11? And I could just see, how war propaganda worked, and it was all about geopolitics and all that type of thing. And then as time went by, I started seeing the power of big pharma, and just the power and influence they had. And it just it we live in a world where, like, just everything is, there's so many things going on behind the scenes. We live in like a illusion, and
Yeah.
people are falling for the illusion, and they're believing what they see on TV and not believing what they're seeing in reality. Like, you look around, like we talked about, like, I don't see a pandemic, and but it just, yeah, I'm hoping we're going in the right direction in regards to people pushing back. In the same way that, like, wars eventually, after they go too far, we finally pull out, because, I'm hoping that it's like, okay, eventually, like, okay, we spent a lot of money, we've gotten some corporations rich, and we've gotten some of our plan accomplished, but now it's time to pull out. And if not, it's all going to crumble, because it seems like that's almost the goal. I don't see how they can continue doing this without completely demolishing what America was founded on. and nationalism and being patriotic during like the wars. I always felt like, oh, it's a way of brainwashing people into going out and fighting other people because we're so proud of being American. And now I'm like, my opinion on that has changed quite a bit, because now I'm like, being proud of being American is some of the reasons why people are fighting back, because they're proud of what it stands for and our core root issues that this country is founded on. And I mean, this country was founded by people who fought against a monarchy and wanted and really try to design a system that would suppress any ability for people to corrupt it and have another monarchy or issues that they had with the UK, with the English monarchy. So it almost seems like the goal is that America's a threat because of this country is uniquely different than other countries. So we just need to like blow it all up by just completely ruining it, and then justifying giving government all this power because the country's completely demolished. And I'm hoping people start seeing that, because I think there does seem to be a larger plan. Like it's more than just big pharma and all. Do you think that there's more going on, or do you think it is just ones and zeros and people just trying to extract the most money?
I think potentially it's probably a mixture of the two, right? It's definitely I would say it's probably more money driven than anything. Um
You're not
that would be my guess.
you're not as
What's that?
as I am.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know. I guess I really don't have any real opinion on if there's really like some sort of like dark horse behind the curtain, like really controlling like Biden. I mean, fuck it, it's completely possible. But I think definitely it's certainly money driven for sure. I definitely do believe that. And back to your other point where you were saying like, you know, yeah, I think we are taking steps forward. I think there is a uprising. And what I was saying before about like there needs to be something bigger to happen. I think it needs to be big in the sense of like, I don't think there needs to be like riots in the street or anything like that, but I think it needs to be enough of a something that's going to get an undeniable amount of attention. Let's say, for example, like more than 50% of the NFL saying, you know what, no, I'm not going to play the game. Right, something like that needs to happen where it's like it's so undeniable. We're like, you know what, we're standing up, and then that is sort of like the catalyst for everybody else across the country to say, you know what, we're going to stand up together against this.
Sorry, I was distracted by my little man.
No worries, man. I see you looking over and like,
Yeah, but
so
yeah,
I think that's what needs to ultimately needs to happen, something big like that.
and the other thing is they're going after our children. That's the thing that really, but speaking of kids, that's the thing that's like boggling my mind. It's like you're going to such lengths to extract so much profit that you're willing to give a vaccine to supposedly protect kids from something that statistically they don't need protecting from. I mean, this is the thing that like that might be the big thing that gets people just over the top, because
which is crazy because not to cut you off, because you're 100% right. It's like, I have a 5-year-old myself, and it's like we knew for a fact that the flu killed children, right? It directly affected children. Meanwhile, COVID didn't, right? Or doesn't. And nobody ever said anything about the flu. Like there was no forced mandates for kids to go out and go get the flu shot. In fact, if you had the sniffles, it was fine to go into school as long as you didn't have anything over what we consider high temperature, and you were fine to go to school. And every day children would die from the flu, and nothing was ever questioned for years. And here we are, again, to your point, like we're forcing now, that's going to be the next thing is like, we're going to force kids to get it. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's where everybody's like, well, that's it. I know for me personally, like if they push that, I'm not gonna force my daughter to get it. Sorry. I guess she won't go to school. I guess she'll have to get homeschooled. I'll stand up for that. No.
Yeah, it's so many of the people who are pushing back against this are parents who are concerned and they can see where it's going. I mean, when two FDA members senior members stepped down during the process of approving the booster shot. Like, what does that tell you? Those are people that were pro the vaccine. They approved the initial vaccine. And now it's like all science is out the window. Now they're telling you can mix and match them. You can collect them all. Like, take them all. It doesn't matter which dosage. It's like,
I like them all.
it's
Yeah.
it's so
I did see a study. You're right. They're like, oh, their studies show that like when you mix them, it's better for you. And it's like, I don't know. How much of that is accurate?
well, isn't that the problem with science too? It's like how you could basically cherry pick any information you want to get the outcome you want. So it's like the fact that like people are like, oh, I saw this study, I saw that study. I'm like, that's great, but I'm like, we need to just eventually put all the studies aside and just look at this logically. Like the hospitals aren't full. That's what they told us was going to happen. All the mobile hospitals that they brought in were never used. The numbers were obviously inflated. I had Dr. Scott Jensen on, who's a family physician in Minnesota and also a governor or senator, and I think he's running for governor now. But they audited a bunch of COVID deaths, and they found car accidents. They found so many different crazy things that it's like, okay, you're just counting deaths with the virus as the same as by the virus. So it's like there's all this evidence. It's like it's just, the kid thing really drives me nuts, because what drives me nuts is the parents that are just like, I cannot wait to get my kid vaccinated. And I'm just like, I'm like, you know what? Like, that's your decision. I think you're a monster, but that's your decision. I'm like, what? But it also shows the power of propaganda and fear. Like, literally, some of these people, unlike you and I, who listen to podcasts and listen to other perspectives, if you've been consuming 18 months of be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, we're all going to die, be afraid, stay at home, like, to think that doesn't have some type of psychological effect on you. Like, these people are dealing with trauma. Like, when people are driving in a car by themselves wearing a mask, like they're going to get the car sick, that's trauma. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's like there's nothing the news could tell you, or there's no science or doctor or anybody who could talk you into taking off that mask because you're afraid. And it, so a little bit is not their fault. I think it's the blame should be on the media, who were milking the shit out of these ratings by just showing case numbers and case numbers and case numbers, when never talking about the PCR test and how they're, how many cycles are running, and how Kerry Mullis, the guy who created it, said it's not really a test for this type of application. So, and he wasn't a fan of Dr. Fauci either. And he had a mysterious death in 2019, coincidentally. A lot of weird shit.
Wow.
Are you familiar with Event 201?
No.
Oh, this was like the first part, because when this was all going down, I'm like, okay, this could be something else, or it could be just a virus that really is going around and getting people sick. But when I saw Event 201, I'm like, oh God, there's way more going on right now. Event 201 was put together by the World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and John Hopkins. And what they did is that it was I think they filmed it in late 2019, but it was like scripted as soon. I started as early as 2018 in regards to putting it all together. And what they did is they recreated the exact scenario we lived through in 2020. They're like, hey, we're gonna get a fake news anchors, put together basically create a small film on what would happen if we had an outbreak of a SARS virus. And literally, it was exactly identical to how everything played out. And if you watch the pandemic documentary, it's the clips that he shows. If you watch the full documentary, it's the clips that he shows in the beginning of the documentary. It's clips from Event 201. And it's literally, so when they say like, we couldn't have predicted this, we had no idea. It's like, no, you guys were actually, you had scenarios that you wrote out, and you knew exactly how this was going to play out. It even talked about protests. It talked about people on social media being censored. It talked about vaccine hesitancy. Like, literally, it was, so it's like, to pretend that, and if you look at Schwab, the guy who runs the World Economic Forum, he wrote the book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. He's the guy who has that famous quote, "You will in the future you will own nothing and be happy." This idea of like basically living in a communist type of globalist type of world where you have universal basic income and all these things where like everybody's on the government's tit and really has zero freedoms, because if you don't get vaccinated, we're going to cut off your money, we're going to cut off your food, we're going to cut. So
Yeah.
that could be the end game, and I'm not saying that is the end game or everybody's pushing for this, but the problem with this whole scenario, like we discussed, is that if you keep taking baby steps in that direction and at some point you don't stop it, that's where we're going to end up, accidentally maybe even.
Yeah. Well, and kind of to add on to that, if we forget about all the facts that we know, right, whether they're true or not, right? It's like, when was the last time and I'm asking you, when was the last time that you took a vaccine, or you were given a vaccine and you got paid for it? Was there ever a time that happened to you?
No.
Never. Me either, right? Well, New York City, well, I saw, I was at the gym a couple of weeks ago, and they're offering for any family, if you get the vaccine, if you get your child, you come in and get your child vaccinated. I think it was like 12 or over. We'll give you $100. Just let that sink in for a little bit. Why? You're going to give me money for something that I should be taking, that's going to keep me safe. You're incentivizing me to take this. Why? And the fact that nobody's questioning that, I mean, that's a problem.
In Massachusetts,
where's that money even coming from?
Good point. Yeah, who's paying that money? Is it taxpayers' money? I mean, what? Like, shouldn't I have some say in where you're throwing my money away to give people? I mean, Massachusetts, they were telling people they would lower your sentence if you go to prison. They would lower your sentencing if you got vaccinated. Like, this is crazy.
You know what? Actually, that would be the reason I would, if I was going to go to jail and I found out that I was going to get a lower sentence, I would probably get the vaccine. Meanwhile, it would take 15 years off the end of my life.
I do the same thing. I'd be like, you know what? Give me all of them. Can I get?
I'll take the chance. Mix and match. I'll collect them all.
Yeah, if you clean my record, I'll just take them all. I'll take shots ahead of time. Give me them now. I'm good for the year.
That's a balance. That's a gamble I'm willing to take. Fine. Shit, man, it's crazy.
It is crazy. Absolutely. But it's the world we live in, and people, like you said, people aren't asking the questions like, why do you need it? First of all, why aren't people asking the questions that there's so many cases when they were televising the case numbers? Like, we must have hit herd immunity a long time ago. I mean, we had so many cases, and why are you telling people who have natural immunity, which historically has always been, accepted as like the best immunity? Why are you just telling them to get the vaccine? And so I feel like you can only suppress the truth for so long, and little by little, things that couldn't be discussed a year ago or a year and a half ago can now be discussed, like lab leak theory, medicines being suppressed that could have helped people and saved lives. So many different things. The fact that Fauci was not trustworthy and lied about so many things, including masks. I mean, first of all, even the mask thing, like, everybody accepted that, like, he lied on national TV, regardless if you believe that he lied because he was trying to stop or prevent everybody from going out and buying masks and a shortage of it, or he lied for some other not so moral reason. Either way, he looked right at the camera and lied. He's capable of lying on national TV during an interview with no hesitation at all. Like, that alone has to be concerning. And he's the highest paid government employee. This guy is the highest paid government employee. The National Institute of Health has so much funding that they give out that people are so afraid of saying anything about, anything negative about him or his organization because they're concerned about funding, that, a lot of people just won't speak out. And there are people out there who think and feel the way we do, and they're afraid of speaking out. That's why I'm so happy that you did click upload and you put that video online and you had the courage of doing it, because there's a lot of people who watch that and you're like, you know what, I have the same concerns, but I might be too afraid to share it because of backlash or whatever. So we need people like yourself, Rogan, people who are willing to put their opinions and perspectives out there, and be like, you know what, there's going to be some pushback, there's going to be some people who are upset with me, but as long as you're honest and you're willing to have the discussion, I'm like that. I'm not afraid of having a discussion with somebody. Like if you disagree with me, let's sit down and talk. Let's figure out, let's find some middle ground. Let's figure out what your concerns are. Let's figure out my concerns. Let's find some middle ground somewhere. And you only have that by being open about how you feel and what you think. So thank God there's, like I said, there's people like you out there who are willing to take that step.
Well, like you, man, I'm willing to see the other side of things as well. I'm not saying like I'm at any point. I'm not married to this idea that I hope I'm wrong. I hope the vaccine's completely safe. It could save, potentially save my life and my children's life, and help generations moving forward. That is my hope, right? That what they're saying is the truth. And in fact, like just yesterday, I was watching Jon Stewart's show on Apple TV. I was I was catching up, and I was watching episode 2. It's called Freedom. I said, oh, let me check this out. So he was leaning towards to the opposite side. He was leaning towards, get the vaccine. Anybody else that gets it is pretty crazy. And my wife came into the living room. She's like, why are you watching this? Why? I'm like, well, because I want to see their point of view. Like, I'm always willing to listen to both sides. So to say that my side is right and to completely ignore the other side, and not even listen to what they have to say is crazy. I was actually genuinely listening to it because I just wanted to test my own truth. Let me see if they have some sort of fact that I'm just not aware about, or some sort of point of view that I'm not aware of. And, I think it's important that you are constantly out there challenging your ideas and your ideology.
I completely agree, and I think that is a aspect that you get from being a long time Rogan listener, or at least I don't know what came first, maybe the way we look at things, or Rogan, but it's maybe that's why we were attracted to him, because we're very similar to him, where he's the same way. He's willing to have people he disagrees with on, and controversial people on, and talk to everybody and anybody. And I think people like you and I, like, we're attracted to that because that's how we are. I'm the exact same way. I listen to a lot of people I disagree with. I had Scott Horton on, who's kind of a well-known libertarian and anti-war guy, and he and I disagreed on the lockdown, and we had like a full hour and a half disagreement about it, and we had a civil, fun discussion about it, and when I had Dennis McKenna on the second time, I think it was way too close to the election time, because he came on and he went on some pro-Biden, anti-Trump rant real early in the show, and we were having like a 1 hour disagreement. But I'm okay with it. Like, I don't see it as like, oh, I don't scrap that as like, oh, that was a crappy show. I see it as like, oh, those are like the gems of shows, because it's like, I want my ideas to be challenged, because if I just live in an echo chamber where I'm only surrounded by people who agree with me, I might be wrong and not even know it. But if I hear other people's perspectives and I'm like, no, that's still incorrect, then at least I know that, like, okay, I've come to this conclusion, because I did exercise all other options, and I'm still at this conclusion, which I think is really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's too important for me, at least. Like, it didn't come in, that way of thinking didn't come until probably after I started listening to JRE. I kind of just accepted the mainstream media for that was the truth, and anything I knew that was just the truth. I never really questioned it. That certainly changed after listening to his show and being a fan for a number of years. But yeah, man, I think it's super critical that you quite. I mean, now, if somebody presents a certain fact to me that I never even thought was or I never accepted as truth, or I never thought was even possible, those moments, man, I'm like, when you get that like, man, I never thought about it that way. I love those moments. It's like, because now you just opened up your mind to a whole new series of possibilities. Like, I love those moments. I embrace that. And that's why, going back to this Jon Stewart show, I was like, I was looking for that. I'm like, maybe they're going to tell me something that I'm just not aware of. So, yeah, I think it's important that you just keep keep your opinions open, and just be open minded to everything.
Well, like Rogan says, the ego gets in the way of a lot, and it's so true. I think a lot of times we care much more about being right than or than trying to find some answers or some truth. It's like we just will debate our side. That's why a lot of times when you hear Rogan show was unique, because when you were listening to people on his show, it really was a exploration. It was a journey of like exploring ideas. On other shows, if there's a debate, a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm defending my team, you're defending your team. At the end of the show, we still disagree, and nobody admits when the other person made a valid point. Where Rogan, you would see that, those are the type of conversations I like having, where it's like if somebody makes a valid point, like I'll give them credit, like, oh, you're right, I actually haven't thought of it that way, or I haven't looked at it from that aspect, which, like you said, is super crucial, because every time I'm wrong, I'm one step closer to being right, because I've learned something new. So
I like that. Yeah.
yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I never even heard of that analogy, but you're right. You do become one step closer to, to that. I think, I mean, but the difference here is that never really in the history of any kind of media has anybody ever sat down with somebody for 2 hours, 2 hours plus, and had a conversation. Like you said, it's like, I'm going to defend my side, you're going to defend your side. They're over talking, they're talking over each other, and nothing ever gets resolved because they only have 5 minutes to do so. So, and then there's the commercial breaks, and it's like, you don't have time to really explore the entire, both sides, and see both sides of the argument. So, I'm grateful for Joe being out there and creating the show that he's done, because I think, like we've said here a number of times, it's definitely opened up the eyes to for many people.
And it's also a lesson. His show is also a lesson on doing what you love to do and what you truly want to do, and don't change what you want to do because of other people or other opinions. Nobody said, hey, Joe, you should do a 3-hour show. Everybody said the opposite. Everybody said, don't do a 3-hour show. Nobody wants to hear. And it's the same thing. I talk to musicians. It's the same thing. Like the musicians that really break through, or anybody who really breaks through, a lot of times it's like they go against the grain. They're like, people tell them, oh, that's never going to work. That's never going to work. And then they're like, you know what? But this is what I want to do. And if I'm satisfied with what I'm doing, that's what it's the most important thing. And eventually they're the ones who break through, because it is different and it does go against the grain. So I don't want to hold you up to too much longer, but I do want let people know where they can get your work, contact you, any future projects you have around the corner.
Yeah, so I just recently, future projects, I just released a video where I used one of Reagan's speeches, actually his inauguration speech from 1981, the same year that I was born, and I just felt that what he said there was super powerful. So anybody listening, go check it out. It's called Foreign and Domestic, and it talks about how we're looking at the government for solutions, yet they're the problem. And anyway, it's a quick video, like much like that freedom video I did on Rogan. To find, to, I guess, get in contact with me, you could just visit my website at samuelriverafilms.com. Hit the contact form. There's a bunch of other content that I have on there that's also on my YouTube channel, Instagram channel, and everything's under Samuel Rivera Films. So it should be pretty easy to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to chat, and keep up the great work, and I'll keep sharing your videos, and everybody hopefully keep sharing your videos. And I think it's a great way of getting a message across while avoiding a argument, because it's easier to send a video and be like, hey, watch this. This is kind of the point I'm trying to make, but in a more artistic method. It's super important people go out there, check out your work. I think you're doing such a great job of just opening people's minds to possibilities of what could happen. And yeah, I think art's a great way of getting that message across, and hopefully you keep growing, and the Rogan sharing your stuff and talking about it. I think will hopefully keep growing your business, and you'll have even more eyes on you, and you'll be one of those super. I mean, you already are a super. I mean, that video was, I had friends sending it to me that aren't even into these type of topics or podcasts, but it moved them so much that they're like, Rick, have you seen this? Rick, have you seen, and I'm like, yeah, actually, I'm gonna have him on, so it was,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. So
Yeah, these videos I put, these guys that I create videos on, like they have such an ability to articulate words that I just, uh, you know, I just don't have that skill, right? So it's like I can take my, what they're saying and my ideas and kind of present them in my own way. So yeah, I think it's super important that these messages get out there, and that's awesome that that it was shared to you by a bunch of your friends. So yeah, man. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on the show, and best of luck to you too, man. Hopefully your show keeps on growing. I mean, it sounds like you had some big names on it, so that's pretty exciting.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I love stories like yours, and because, like I said at the beginning of the show, it reminds me of my story where I called it the Ripple Effect podcast because I truly believed in the ripple effect. This idea that we can all create some type of ripple, and you never know how big of a ripple it's going to turn into. And but the first step is just going out there and doing something. Do something, and pursue whatever passion you have, and try to make a change or a difference, or just don't be afraid to be outspoken, and you never know what type of impact you have on people. And next thing you know, like your story of just picking up a camera and just wanting to do this, and now it's one of the most viral videos of this year, and I'm sure it's mind-blowing. I'm sure it's crazy. So it's but it all happened because
Yeah.
you had the courage to just do something, and you weren't settling for just a 9 to 5.
No, no, absolutely. I think if you're waiting for that perfect moment for you to execute whatever it is that this idea that you have, that perfect moment's never going to come. Like if you look at my first video, it don't go watching it. It's pretty bad, but it took that horrible video to be the first video, and then you just continuously improve upon the last one that you did, and that's really how I got to the point that I got to today. Like I never went to film school. I never had any kind of like formal training. I just made one video, and then the next one I try to make better than the one prior to that. So don't wait for these perfect moments to come to you, because they're never going to come. Like you just got to get out there and just take action. Just take the baby steps, as you said earlier, to drive and push towards your passion.
Yeah, I remember Rogan having was it the art of writing, or what was it? It was one about a book about
Oh
procrastination.
yeah, the war of
The War of
art
Art,
of is it the
right?
war of art?
Yeah, I
The
think it
art
is.
of war is
Yeah,
the
the
war
Art
of
of
art.
War is the old book,
Yeah.
and then yeah, so that, and then it was the War of Art, and then the Art of War. Yeah, so it could be a little confusing, but the War of Art was all about doing something artistic, and just how much we procrastinate, and how we all deal with that. We all deal with, like, maybe tomorrow, maybe whatever, and that discipline is so important. That's why getting into sports and jujitsu, or I play soccer, I play basketball. I've always been a gym rat. It's you learn discipline. There's lessons you can take from art, right? Like there's things you learn in film and music and writing that really helps you with self-reflecting and going deep inside. But I think the mental discipline, you can learn a lot of that just from being like, hey, I'm sore, but I'm going to the gym, or I'm tired, but I'm going to go to practice, or I'm going to go roll, and every time you succeed in that internal battle, it gives you confidence that you can, you're strong. It's all mental, that it's in your head, and a lot of it is, a lot of our struggles aren't physical, they're mental. It's all internal, and we're making excuses, or we're creating the speed bumps for ourselves. And it's like, no, I created the speed bump. I can remove this speed bump, stop making excuses, and just go, So it's, yeah, that's why it's funny, like people who are JRE fans like us, like I think we, without even meeting, you almost know that you probably have a lot in common in regards to the way you think and look at things, just because like we've all kind of been influenced by the same show, and being attracted to it because of the way he thinks, So it's important. It definitely is.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. There was something I read in a book recently that said that tomorrow is where procrastinators become heroes, and it's basically what the line was saying was, or the book was just trying to say is like it's always easy to say I'll do it tomorrow, but it's today. Today is the only day that you have, right? Tomorrow's just an illusion, and you've got to just take the action steps now. Like that's all you're guaranteed is this moment right here. and you can start right now. Like it's really that simple. It's just up to you to get out of your own way and take the actions needed to move forward.
Yep. Pick up a microphone or pick up a camera, whatever. I tell people all the time, like whatever passion you have, whatever hobby you enjoy, do it. Find time to do it. You won't regret it. And you never know what it turns into. So, and like we said in the beginning of the show, you know, you're much more likely to look back at your life and be like, you know what, I'm glad I pursued that. Maybe it didn't get to where I thought it was going, but I'm glad I at least attempted it instead of like never doing it and always wondering what if, you know.
Yeah, the what if is always going to be the worst thing, right? It's like I'd rather have tried and failed than to never try.
Exactly. Yep. But thank you so much. So enjoy the rest of your day. I'll send you the links to the show once it's up and live. And then I'll put all your links to your YouTube channel and all your social media accounts in the show description so people can hook up with you if they want and check out the video if they haven't, which it's probably unlikely, but if they they can check it out. And enjoy the rest of your day. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Hey, take care.
All right, you too, Rick. Take care.